ki, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki, Gaur Premanande, all glories to the simple devotees, all glories to the simple devotees, all glories to the simple devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we are reading from Canto 3, Chapter 32, Entanglement in Fruitive Activities, verse number 1. So yes, we will be starting this new chapter, starting with verse number 1. Kapila uvāca atha yo gṛha-medhīyān dharmān evāvasan gṛhe kāmam arthaṁ ca dharmān svān dogdhi bhūyaḥ piparti tān. Kapila uvāca atha yo gṛha-medhīyān dharmān evāvasan gṛhe kāmam arthaṁ ca dharmān svān dogdhi bhūyaḥ piparti tān. Kapila uvāca atha yo gṛha-medhīyān dharmān evāvasan gṛhe kāmam arthaṁ ca dharmān svān dogdhi bhūyaḥ piparti tān. Kāmam arthaṁ ca dharmāṁ svān dogdhi bhūyaḥ piparti tān. Kapila uvāca kāmam arthaṁ ca dharmān svān dogdhi bhūyaḥ piparti tān. Mataji. Kapila uvāca atha yo gṛha-medhīyān dharmān evāvasan gṛhe kāmam arthaṁ ca dharmān svān dogdhi bhūyaḥ piparti tān. Kapila uvāca, Lord Kapila said, atha, now, yaha, the person who, gṛha-medhīyān, of the householders, dharmān, duties, eva, certainly, āvasan, living, gṛhe, at home, kāmam, sense gratification, artham, economic development. Cha and dharmān, religious rituals. Svān, his. Dogdhi, enjoys. Bhūyaḥ, again and again. Piparti, performs. Tān, them. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. The Personality of Godhead said, the person who lives in the center of household life derives material benefits by performing religious rituals, and thereby he fulfills his desire for economic development and sense gratification. Again and again he acts the same way. Purport. There are two kinds of householders. One is called gṛha-medhī and the other is called the gṛhastha. The objective of the gṛha-medhī is sense gratification, and the objective of the gṛhastha is self-realization. Here the Lord is speaking about the gṛha-medhī, or the person who wants to remain in this material world. His activity is to enjoy material benefits by performing religious rituals for economic development and thereby ultimately satisfy the senses. He does not want anything more. Such a person works very hard throughout his life to become very rich and eat very nicely and drink. By giving some charity for pious activity, he can go to a higher planetary atmosphere in the heavenly planets in his next life. But he does not want to stop the repetition of birth and death and finish with the concomitant miserable factors of material existence. Such a person is called a gṛha-medhī. A gṛhastha is a person who lives with family, wife, children and relatives but has no attachment for them. He prefers to live in a family life rather than as a mendicant or sannyasi. But his chief aim is to achieve self-realization or to come to the standard of Krishna consciousness. Here, however, Lord Kapila Deva is speaking about the gṛha-medhīs who have made their aim the materialistically prosperous life which they achieve by sacrificial ceremonies, by charities and by good work. They are posted in good positions, and since they know that they are using up their assets of pious activities, they again and again perform activities for sense gratification. It is said by Prahlad Maharaj, Punaha Punascharvita Charvananam, they prefer to chew the already chewed. Again and again they experience the material pangs, even if they are rich and prosperous, but they do not want to give up this kind of life. The sense of purport. Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmitam Ena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So if you just So in the previous chapter 30 and 31, we have studied how a living entity suffers within the womb of the mother, and even after taking birth also he still suffers with various desires which he cannot fulfill, and being conditioned by three modes of material nature, and especially by the sex desire. And in the current chapter it talks about the destiny of such a person when he performs different types of activities. That is why the chapter name is given as entanglement in fruitive activities. And in the current verse it is mentioned that the person who lives in the center of household life derives material benefits by performing religious rituals, and thereby he fulfills his desire for economic development and sense gratification. Again and again he acts the same way. So the interesting thing is the last line, again and again he acts the same way. So if you look at the word-to-word meaning, it is said, bhūyaḥ piparti tān, which means bhūyaḥ means again and again. Piparti means he conducts those activities, performs those activities again and again. And what activities he performs again and again? Dharmān. Dharmān here is translated as ritualistic, religious rituals which a person performs to obtain various material benefits. And arthaṁ. Artham means economic development. Kāmam means sense gratifications. So these are the three activities which he performs again and again, and he does not stop. And why he performs these activities again and again? It is because dogdhi means he enjoys, right? Because every activity ultimately it is impelled by some kind of happiness. Otherwise, why would anybody perform any activity if there is no happiness? So because there is some kind of a happiness a person is deriving, so he likes to perform again and again, right? Just like my kid, he wants to eat chocolate again and again, he doesn't stop, So like that, a materialistic person, he wants to do the same thing again and again. He does not stop. And if you, because ultimately it is everything is impelled by to derive happiness and to avoid suffering. And if we, there is a similar verse in this line, dukkha traya abhijata jignasa tat abhigatakhe hetuhu, means due to suffering, from three kinds of suffering, one inquires into the means of terminating them. And this applies to everybody. Either you are a materialistic person or a spiritual person, everybody experiences suffering and everybody wants to remove this suffering. Because there are two things. One is happiness, right? Obtaining happiness. And second thing is removing suffering. Which is more important? Removing suffering is more important or obtaining happiness is more important? Right? I mean, obviously the first thing is removing the suffering. Because if you have suffering and happiness both, you can't really enjoy, right? Like say you have diabetes and you go to a birthday party, I mean, what can you enjoy? I mean, you can't eat anything there, right? So removing your diabetes is more important than, than enjoying something else. So the priority is always given to removing the suffering, right? When you have money, first clear off the debt, then before you enjoy that, right? Because debt is always suffering. So the human psychology is like that. First let's try to remove the suffering and then happiness will automatically follow. That is why everybody is trying to remove the suffering, some way or the other. And then from that comes the inquiry that how can I remove the suffering. From there starts the jignasa, the inquiry into how I can remove suffering. And what do you want after removing suffering? You want happiness, right? Everybody wants happiness. And now, where is this happiness? Where is the happiness? Is the happiness is in the object or in your mind? Right? Suppose, let's say that if the happiness is in the object, then the same object should give happiness equally to everybody. Right? So let's say that you give a piece of meat. The dog will like it. The dog will enjoy it. The dog is very, very happy when you give a piece of meat. But when you give a piece of meat to a sadhu, he will feel suffer. He will feel the pain. Right? He will not enjoy that. Right? So, where is the suffering? No, where is the happiness? Is the happiness in the object or the happiness is in the mind? The happiness is in the mind ultimately, right? That is why the same object can instill happiness in one person and suffering in another person, because ultimately happiness or suffering is in one's own mind. So similarly, so the ultimate thing is, one has to control one's mind. And that is why in the Bhagavatam, the first canto, it is said, Vedyam vastavam atra vastu shivadam tapat trayo mulanam. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. So it is said, it is basically this is addressing to Lord Krishna. And how it is addressing? It is said, Vastava vastu. You see there? Vedyam vastavam. Vastavam atra vastu shivadam. Vastavam means reality, it exists. And vastu means object. Because there is no object where it has happiness in it. Happiness is ultimately in one's own mind. If there is any object which has happiness, that is Lord Krishna. Because Lord Krishna, he is happiness embodied, he is bliss embodied. So when a person comes in contact with Krishna, he experiences the bliss or happiness. And what is the result of such of such contact? Tapatrayo mulanam, that removes the threefold suffering, because we are actually going after inert objects to remove these three types of suffering. But ultimately, because there is no happiness in the object, they are not able to ultimately remove any suffering. But Krishna, being the Vastava Vastu and Shivadam, means all auspicious, right? That is why only by coming in contact with Krishna, these three folds of miseries can be truly removed. And here it is said, dogdhi bhūyaḥ piparti, enjoys again and again. So, but however, it is still mentioned that he is still enjoying, right? Even though a person who is not coming in contact with Krishna also, he is also enjoying. It's not that he is not enjoying, right? And he is not only enjoying once, again and again. That's what is said in this verse. He is enjoying again and again. So what type of enjoyment is this? What type of enjoyment is this person enjoying? So that is nothing but illusory and temporary. That is why in the purport it is mentioned, punah punah charvita charvananam. That kind of enjoyment is actually not real enjoyment. And that is basically, it is due to ignorance, avidya, right? So what is avidya? There are many definitions of avidya, but there is one interesting definition of avidya given in the Yoga Sutras by Patanjali. What does he say? Anitya, asuchi, dukkha, anatmasu, nitya, suchi, sukha, kyatir, avidya. So this is a definition of avidya given by Patanjali. What does it mean? Avidya means to consider anitya as nitya, to consider asuchi as suchi, to consider dukkha as sukha, and to consider anatmashu as atma. So what it means is that, what is anitya? Means impermanent. A person influenced by avidya consider that thing which is impermanent to be eternal, right? For example, in the purport is mentioned, a person is performing various ritualistic activities, thinking for what? Thinking to go to higher planets, thinking that the higher planets are eternal place. But however, they are not. That's why it is said one has to come back. So that is avidya. To consider anitya, those things which are impermanent, to be eternal. And next is asuchi as suchi, to consider those impure objects as pure objects. What is that? Like getting attracted to the opposite gender. This material body is a filthy substance, it's a filthy object, but the person enjoys it. The person thinks that this asuchi as he thinks as asuchi, the most pure object. And dukkha as sukha. What is dukkha? Is basically suffering, right? So this is the kind of, but he still enjoys it, right? Just like the example is given, the camel is chewing the thorns and he is enjoying his own blood, but actually that is a suffering. But being influenced by avidya, he is thinking that that suffering is also happiness. That is because ultimately it's all in the mind, right? When a person is conditioned to enjoy one's own suffering, he will do that, right? Like we can see some people, they are sadistic. They derive pleasure when others are suffering. Actually, there's no pleasure there, but some people enjoy that, right? So that is why it is said as dukkha as sukha. And inert as conscious, anatma as atma, means like material objects, right? Because there are so many things a person wants to acquire, thinking that that will give them happiness. But however, they are inert objects. They cannot really give happiness. But he thinks that those objects are giving happiness. So that is why it is said as anatma as atma. So this is the definition of avidya given by Patanjali in Yoga Sutras. So that is why a person here, dogdhi bhūyaḥ piparti, means he is enjoying again and again, because he is influenced by this avidya. Under this avidya, he is deriving some kind of pleasure, and this pleasure he wants to repeat again and again. And this ultimately, this pleasure also, there is an interesting comparison given in Taittiriya Upanishad in Anandavalli, 2nd chapter. This bliss, it is over there, an analogy is given trying to explain what are the different types of happiness, or what are the different levels of happiness which different living entities are experiencing. For example, the human bliss. What is human bliss? When a person becomes happy, when he is wealthy, when he is handsome, when he is beautiful, when he has all the prosperity, he is feeling happy, right? But when you multiply that bliss by 100 times, that is a bliss experienced by Gandharvas or the heavenly beings. And when you multiply that bliss by 100 times, that is a bliss experienced by Pitris, those inhabitants in the planets of Pitris. And when you multiply that bliss by 100 times, that is a bliss of Devas. And when you multiply that bliss by 100 times, that is a bliss of Kamadev. And when you multiply the bliss of Kamadev by 100 times, that is a bliss of Indra. And when you multiply the bliss of Indra by 100 times, that is a bliss of Brihaspati. And when you multiply the bliss of Brihaspati by 100 times, that is a bliss of Brahma. And when you multiply the bliss of Brahma by 100 times, that is a bliss of the impersonal Brahman. So in this way, everybody is thinking that they are enjoying, but every enjoyment is relative. There is somebody who is enjoying better than you, Okay. So anyway, but of course, if you think like that, you will not enjoy anymore. You will suffer when you think that somebody else enjoying more than you. But ultimately, Krishna is the fountain head of all the enjoyment, and he is the embodiment of all the bliss, right? So, and in the same Taittiriya Upanishad, it is mentioned, now who is qualified to get liberation? And over there, it is said that Shantam Enam Tato Viduhu. By knowing that Anandamaya Purusha, because it is addressed over there, it is Krishna is addressed as Anandamaya Purusha, because as I mentioned previously, the Krishna is embodiment of bliss. So when a person comes in contact with Krishna, who is bliss personified, then one is qualified to achieve liberation. And when a person does not know this, and when he is still trying to enjoy his material senses, then that person can never achieve liberation. And that is why, and he always tries to remain within these material planets, and he tries to enjoy again. And interestingly, if you see this chapter, if you look at the overall chapter number 32 and try to understand what is the main subject matter that is talking in this chapter, you will be surprised to know this is exactly the sum and substance of Taittiriya Upanishad. Well, when I was reading through this chapter yesterday, when I'm preparing for my class, I was going through all the verses, and somehow I just felt that the sequence in which it is described and the topics which are described in this current chapter, it was very, very familiar. Then I realized that actually this is nothing but exact summary of Taittiriya Upanishad. Because if you see here, obviously the Bhagavatam is a natural commentary on Vedanta Sutras, right? It's a summary study of Vedanta Sutras. And this Vedanta Sutra is also actually a summary study of Upanishads. And what are Upanishads? Upanishads are basically the Jnana-kanda portion of the Vedas, which deals with the Jnana section, right? So naturally, Srimad Bhagavatam's message also has to be consistent with that Vedic knowledge. So, and especially these Upanishads, mainly they actually deal with the impersonal Brahman feature, right? But however, Taittiriya Upanishad is a little bit different because it also deals with rasa and bhakti. And Srila Prabhupada also actually has quoted Taittiriya Upanishad many times in his purports. And there are 2 or 3 famous shlokas which he quotes. Does anyone remember any famous verse Prabhupada quotes from Taittiriya Upanishad? Right? So the foundation tattva for our Gaudiya Vaishnava Siddhanta is rasa tattva. Right? Rasa. And the original word of rasa actually comes from the Taittiriya Upanishad. Raso vai saha. And Prabhupada actually quotes that many times. Because it is very rare to see Upanishad talking about rasa or bhakti. It is very rare. Because Upanishads mainly deal with impersonal Brahman. But in Taittiriya Upanishad, it is in many places, the concept of rasa and bliss are very elaborately explained. And Srila Prabhupada actually quotes this Taittiriya Upanishad in many occasions. So if you look at what are discussed, what are topics which are covered in the chapter number 32, there are some disciplinary instructions. Disciplinary instructions means following one's dharma, accepting a spiritual master, performing one's Vaidhi Bhakti. There are some instructions given. And the same instructions we can also find in the Taittiriya Upanishad, the first chapter, which is called as Shikshavalli. The Shikshavalli also covers the same subjects. And then it also discusses about the destiny of different types of people, who performs the karma kanda, jnana kanda and bhakti kanda, and what are the different types of higher planetary or lower planetary they achieve, and how a person achieves liberation. So this is a topic which is discussed in this current chapter also, and the same thing is discussed in the Taittiriya Upanishad also. And the other thing is and how is the Lord perceived by different types of people. How a karma kandi perceives Bhagavan, and how a jnana kandi perceives Bhagavan, and how a bhakti yogi perceives Bhagavan. There are different types of perception by different people. And the same thing is explained in this current chapter also. In the coming verses, you will see how a sakama bhakta is behaving, how a nishkama bhakta is behaving, right? And all those things are there, and how everybody is realizing Bhagavan in their own capacity. So we can see that. So this is very much the same. And again, there is a more technical discussion about the panchakoshas, means what are the 5 types of pranas which is covering the body. But of course, in this there is a very brief description. It doesn't go into the detail, but Taittiriya Upanishad goes very much into the detail of annamaya kosha, pranamaya kosha, and all those 5 types of koshas, which is also covered in the current chapter. And the most interesting thing is the emphasis on bhakti. Even though they are talking about all these things, but the underlying message is how is bhakti more important, and how the emphasis is laid on bhakti even to achieve jnana and vairagya. So that is something which is very interesting, and which is covered basically both in Taittiriya and in the chapter number 32. So from my understanding, from what I understood yesterday when I was going through this chapter, and so I can tell you very honestly that if you really understand chapter number 32, all the technical details and all the conclusions, you really understood Taittiriya Upanishad also alongside. They are having the same, almost more or less the same message. So going a little bit more into the details, so this body of a living entity is covered by 3 types of bodies, right? And there is gross body, and there is subtle body, and there is a causal body. So the atma, the soul, is covered by these 3 types of bodies. Or this gross body sometimes is also called as annamaya kosha. Because what is annamaya? Because when we eat food, that food is transformed into this lump of flesh, our body, right? That is why sometimes it is also referred as annamaya kosha. And then we have subtle body. And the subtle body is also called as pranamaya kosha. Because the subtle body is being nourished by prana. And there are 5 types of pranas. And that prana is holding the subtle body. And above that, there is causal body. That is anandamaya sharira. So these 3 types of bodies are actually covering one's soul. And the gross body is basically made up of 16 elements. 16 elements means there's like, if you just look at the body, even like in a chemistry point of view, there's like iron, phosphorus, chlorine, there are different types of chemicals which is making up this material body. And those are 16 types of elements. And this gross body is destroyed at the time of death. But when the time of death, even the gross body is destroyed, but one's pranamaya body still remains. The pranic body still remains. And that pranic body is made up of 19 elements. And those 19 elements are, manas, buddhi, chitta, ahankara. There are 4 types of mind and 5 prana, and there is 5 karmendriyas, 5 jnanendriyas. So total put together there are 19 elements, and that is how a pranamaya body is made up of. And this pranamaya body basically is the one who travels to the other planetary systems when a person gives up this gross body. And ultimately there is a causal body, which is basically 16 plus 19, 35, and basically these are in the causal state, and that is called as a causal body, or one's own swarupa. You can understand that as causal body. So on all these 3 types of bodies are actually bound together. They are all bound together, and bound by what? They are all bound by Ichcha Shakti, or the free will or the desire. This free will or the desire is basically binding these 3 types of bodies together. It's spiritual. It's a spiritual body. And the goal of yoga is basically to liberate a person from these 3 types of coverings, or especially the gross and subtle types of coverings, right? And then experience and and situate oneself in one's own swarupa and avasthita. That swarupa and avasthita is basically the causal body, which is made up of anandamaya shakti, or the bliss or the chit potency of the Lord. So that is the goal of yoga. And And so actually Srila Prabhupada actually quotes Taittiriya Upanishad verse number 2.7. That is where this Raso Vaisaha verse comes from. But the verse before also is very much interesting, where it is said, it is basically explains the process of yoga system, that Ayam Hiranmaya Purushaha. This Lord is basically is referred as Hiranmaya Purushaha. Hiranmaya Purusha means as a Paramatma feature who is situated in everybody's heart. And the Jnani, he is supposed to meditate on the Paramatma who is situated in one's heart. And this Lord is Amritaha, means who is beyond the material world. He is transcendental. Even though he is present in one's material body, but he is still transcendental. And how is the Lord understood? It is understood through Manomayaha. Manomayaha means basically is translated as pure mind. I don't think we can go into all the details. Basically this Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya and all those koshas. And this the Lord in the heart is understood by Manomaya kosha, or the pure mind. And what happens as a result? Swarajyam apnoti, means one becomes free from karma, which is basically binding these three types of bodies together, the gross, subtle and the causal body, which is binding them together. And what happens after that? Vijnana padahi, means one develops the spiritual senses. So it's interesting because usually whenever Upanishads talks about liberation, they don't really talk what happens after liberation. They'll tell that now you are liberated, but they don't really go into the details. But in this verse of Taittiriya Upanishad, it is very interesting to see that it also talks about what happens after liberation, because it also talks about the spiritual senses, which is a little bit rare, So that is why I thought this verse is very much important as well, because it talks about spiritual senses, what happens after liberation. So anyway, so this is the goal of yoga. Basically, the conditioned living entity who is covered by these three types of body, gross, physical, gross, subtle and the causal bodies, who is trying to enjoy this subtle body, having no information about the higher types of happiness and trying to enjoy it again and again and bound up by the the loss of karma. And the goal of yoga is to liberate that person by experiencing the higher type of happiness in the Anandamaya Kosha or the Krishna consciousness. Okay, thank you. I like to conclude my class here. Any comments or questions?
Yeah, you were mentioning a lot from the Taittiriya Upanishad.
Yes.
Is that from a translation or what?
I didn't understand.
You so many things from that Upanishad. I just want to know.
Yeah, so what is the question, Prabhuji? Yeah, Taittiriya Upanishad, yes. So you're asking about the translation?
Yeah, no, in other words, you were saying so many things. I just never read that before. Is that from somebody's translation or what?
Yeah, so, because in our line, in the Gaudiya Parampara line, basically nobody really translated the Taittiriya Upanishad as such. We have Brahma Sutras translated by Baladev Vidya Bhushan, but he did not translate the Upanishads as such. So usually we refer to the the Ramanacharya's translation as to be authentic translation in this regard, because he is also Vaishnavacharya, and we refer to his translation, because even Shankaracharya also translated, but he has his own meanings. But if you wanna look into that, we can look into the Ramanacharya's translation.
That's Ramanujacharya, you said?
Yeah, exactly.
But he didn't translate it into English, though. I just saw.
No, he did not translate, but Bhanuswami translated in English.
Okay, all right.
Bhanuswami, yes, he's
okay. Thank you.
Thank you, by the way, very interesting class. I'm under the impression that the spiritual senses are our original senses, and when our original senses are covered by Maya or matter, that's the material senses. It's not like a different set of senses. Is that consistent with what but that's from what I've heard Prabhupada say. So is that consistent with what you said there?
Yeah, exactly.
It's not a separate set of senses, it's just...
No, it is basically, that is why it is called as causal state. That is what they call it, causal I mean, there's no perfect translation for that word, Sanskrit word, but basically they call it causal. Means, it is not like manifested yet like a gross thing. It is because it is subtle, but it causes. Just like, when the Brahma is creating also, right? There's a, there's a causal state, and also there's a manifested state. So the causal body, that's why it's called causal body. And of course, the causal body is obviously coming from the, the spiritual senses. Because there are spiritual senses, that is why there is material senses too, right? Otherwise, that wouldn't make any sense, because how would you have something which you already don't have it, I mean, it's not something, yeah.
So is elevation to higher material planets just a less restricted situation of the spiritual senses? Like now, there's only really one set of senses, your spiritual senses, and when they're covered, significantly, you're in the material world, you're experiencing.
Yeah.
When we're less covered, there you might be experiencing Gandharva Loka, then Pitri Loka, then Indra, like that. Is that how it works? As the senses become less covered by Maya, you experience higher
basically,
realms?
all the living entities in the higher planetary systems, they all have the same body. They are all having pranamaya body. They are all having same type of body called pranamaya body. Okay. They are all having 19 elements. Doesn't matter which planet you stay in. They all have 19 elements in their body. And when a person is in the Bhuloka, he is having 16 elements in his body. But the only thing what differentiates from a person in the Brahmaloka versus a person in a Pitraloka is his advancement in consciousness. But the body itself is the same.
Where does consciousness come in? We have these, spiritual subtle bodies, but where does consciousness come in on this?
Yeah, I mean, consciousness is coming from the soul, so that's an intrinsic nature of the soul. So
that's like built in, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's an intrinsic nature of the soul, right? Because that's a part of the soul nature, so that is where the consciousness is coming from. I mean, I don't know if I've made it clear.
So, yeah, I'm just wondering, because at the time of death, it depends on what your consciousness is.
Yeah, so, actually, if you look at the exact translation of the Bhagavad Gita verse, what does it say? The specific word is used is bhava. Yam yam yanti smaran bhavam, right? So the word actually used is bhava. Bhava, basically what does bhava mean? Bhava is not exactly consciousness. Sometimes we say it is consciousness, but bhava is not exactly consciousness. Bhava basically means that what is your mood, right? That's what it means. So depending on what type of mood a person is having, he will go to that destination, right? Suppose, let's say I'm sitting right now on this chair, right? When I get up, where will I go? I will go where my mind says, right? I mean, so same way, right? So when a person leaves the body also, he will go where his bhava is dictating him to go. Yeah, bhava and consciousness are not two, same things. I mean, they're same, but they're not exactly same. That's just a problem with the translation. Yeah. Bhava is an expression of consciousness, and the consciousness is one. There's no two types of consciousness, but bhavas can be different. Bhava means what? Consciousness means what? Awareness. That's it. But what you're aware of, that's kind of bhava. I don't know if I'm making it clear, but
Prabhu, it's just a comment.
Yeah.
But in my, after seeing all the detailed explanation there, then I was thinking that many of us, like myself maybe mostly, sometimes all these subtleties and very detailed explanation, it might appear to be a little bit confused, and it's like, wow, you just keep floating.
Yeah.
So what I got from that, if I can tie it up with something that might be relative. This is not to undo what you did. You did really wonderful, but Krishna in the 10th canto in the Bhagavad Gita, he says, "O mighty conqueror of enemies, there's no end to my divine manifestations. What I have spoken to you is but a mere indication of my infinite opulences." And in the next verse, he says, "Know that all opulent, beautiful, and glorious creation spring from but a spark of my splendor." And then the next one, the last one. "But what need is there, Arjuna, for all this detailed knowledge? With a single fragment of myself, I pervade and support this entire universe." And the conclusion I got from this is that if a person, sometimes many people are not really even, like let's say my mother, she was not even able to read, or some of my family members.
Right.
But if they can just focus in the, let's say, the bhakti, the bhakti element. So my question is, can you elaborate on that bhakti, that can cover all these things for someone?
Yeah, so for example, let's say that don't eat too much sugar, that will cause you diabetes. Let's say I say this, I give an advice to you like that, right? It's a simple advice, you can just follow it, but it's not so easy to follow, right? Because, so sometimes, sometimes then you have to explain, like technical things. When you eat sugar, that will spike your glucose levels and insulins and all those things. What will happen in your body? It kind of makes you scary, then you take it seriously, right? So it's like that. Sometimes you can just say things simply, but sometimes you can go more analytically and technically so that people understand the gravity of what we are dealing with. So this is something like that, because even Kapila also, even if you look at Kapila also, he's not really covering everything in this chapter also. It is just a summary study. And even then when he's covering this also, his main focus is on bhakti. If you look at the last verses also, his main focus is also that how establishing the superiority of bhakti and how bhakti is the most important thing. So that message is always intact, and that is the main teaching. But sometimes we kind of like go around it, to kind of build the gravity of the topic what we are discussing. That's all. Okay, can you give that? We'll come back.
Yeah. Somebody back there? No?
Yeah, can you give?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Basically, the subtle body comprises of three main elements: mind, intelligence, and ego. Then how come actually these 9 elements come from actually? From these three or otherwise?
No, see, generally it is said that subtle body basically means mind, intelligence and ego, right? So actually that is a problem, because basically whenever we are translating a Sanskrit word into English, this is a problem. There is nothing like subtle body. There is no equivalent word for subtle in Sanskrit. In Sanskrit, if you want to translate it, you have to say pranamaya body. That is why I put it in the bracket pranamaya. And when you say prana has 19 elements in it. So when demigods are there, sometimes you say, okay, demigods are having subtle bodies. They're not really having subtle bodies. That's just an oversimplification. What they're having is actually pranamaya bodies, and pranamaya body has more than just mind, intelligence, and ego. They have, karmendriyas, jnanendriyas, and also they have 5 types of prana present within them.
Okay. And the last, if the causal body also consists of those gross body elements.
No, it does not contain them actually.
That you are mentioning there, 19 plus 16 together, correct, it is correct. Actual causal body.
It is 35.
Then in that case actually the gross elements also become spiritual, or otherwise
no, that is
they
the
remain
problem.
In the same position.
It is not that these 16 elements are exactly present in the same form in the causal body. They are not present like that. They are present in a causal state. It's not like that element is exactly present in the causal body. It's not like that. It's in a causal state. I don't know how to explain a causal state. It's a little bit difficult subject to explain.
Hare Krishna.
After that
is a causal body coming from Mahatattva? This is what we have when we are Mahatattva?
No, it is not coming from Mahatattva. Mahatattva is a material thing.
But when we are in Mahatattva, when we repeating our cycle, when material world is coming up, this is from, is Ananda Maya different from Svarupa? And if yes, how?
Yeah, so
what is the difference?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why everybody's asking about I mean, I can only explain a little bit because, it's a vast topic and yeah, so, okay, let me answer the first question. Basically, you are asking, is the causal body part of Mahatattva? It is not part of Mahatattva because Mahatattva is still, again, it's a gross thing, right? I mean, it's still a material thing, it's not spiritual, right? So, only the gross and subtle body are coming from Mahatattva. And Anandamaya Kosha is basically spiritual. So, that has nothing to do with the Mahatattva, it is spiritual body and it is an intrinsic nature of the soul. Okay, I mean, that's the most simplest thing I can say. But maybe at some other time I can elaborate more on this, but it's, yeah, anyway. Anybody else has any questions or comments?
So, is our material personality just really our spiritual personality,
Yeah.
but influenced by different varieties and degrees of illusion? Is that a correct way to think of it?
Yeah, because see, even in the, just as you go to higher planets, right, all the way to the top of the, Hiranyagarbha, which is the Lord Brahma's planet. So till there's a different, various levels of illusion still affecting a person. So illusion is still there, but illusion are in the, in the Divya Dham, or where Lord Brahma stays, that is the least, like almost negligible, you can say. And that is why those living entities in that planet, when they leave after the creation, they go back to Godhead, they don't come back again. So yes, as you go higher, the level of illusion also decreases. Even though they have the same body, but still the level of illusion is different for everybody.
That was related to Savasta's question, actually, and related to his question. So I think he was trying to get you to agree that bhakti supersedes all these things. In other words, you kind of defended it nicely, that all this information, detailed information, it makes people more aware of the gravity and the importance of that.
Correct.
But is that a fact, though, that if somebody just has bhakti, like, does that supersede all the gyan and everything like that? Is it possible to just...
Yeah, definitely, of course. I mean, that's the whole point, right? Basically, the ultimate thing is, to understand that, the Krishna is Supreme Personality of Godhead and we have to surrender to them, right? I mean, and if a person is able to do that, then his life is successful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, couldn't be summarized that if you have pure consciousness, you go back to Krishna.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
And if
yes.
you don't have that, then you go into different material bodies, different planets over and over again.
Yeah, something like that. Yes. So that's an explanation, right? Because, like, if that is why every chapter of Bhagavatam is the same message, but it's just different details to teach the same message. So in this context, Lord Kapila basically is taking the more of a jnana approach, and more. Going towards the Sankhya and Upanishadic knowledge to establish the same point. Thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Yeah. Yeah. No, this is my prayer. It's not in notes. These are my prayers. No, it's not notes. Oh yeah.